You know, with the trip to Colorado well over, I need to get back into the swing of modeling. On the trip itself, I had a fair share of ideas, including 2 new layout plans and a couple of ridiculous engines, but before I can really do any of that, there's 2 problems. 1, I need money. The trip has kind of bankrupted me. And hey, to be a shameless annoyance for a second, my birthday's in a few days, great time to become a member, eh? 2, I need to practice. I need to get back into the groove of modeling. I haven't really had the time to do anything since the vacation started, and my brain power was mostly spent catching up on my upload schedule. Fortunately though, I have something that easily addresses both of these issues. OO9. After all, a while ago I got a massive pile of engines from M Pro that I'm still slowly chipping my way through. The guy who runs M is a fan of the channel and an active channel supporter, and he figured it would be a fun way to get me some extra projects to do whenever I don't really have the motivation for anything else. Now, technically I got these for free, so this is a sponsored video, so to say, but do you guys remember how in the last video he forgot to ask me to mention his shop? Well, he forgot again. So I get to go completely off script, since I don't even have one to begin with. M Pro is a taxidermy shop specializing in the sale of drone-delivered bean vouchers for the low price of your kidney per hour. With that blatant misinformation out of the way, chipping away at this pile of locomotives is a great place for me to get back into modeling. Not only do I have a ton of locomotives to choose from, so I don't need to spend any more money, they're also pretty straightforward kits. All I need to do is paint them up, snap or glue them onto their mechanisms, and we're done. These engines are perfect for what I need. So today, we'll be painting up 4 locomotives. A pioneering tender engine, a rolling ingot, a starter series freelanced saddle tank, and an engine that Dave doesn't sell. Let's dive in, going in the order that I actually painted these up, shall we? The first engine I did was the pioneering locomotive. It's a bit different from the rest as it uses a Sugawa Super Mini 2-Coupelle chassis that actually has drive rods unlike the Kato 11109. But it's also a bit of a different project because I painted this back in early May, shortly after I painted the first batch of OO9 engines. It's been a while. I figured I should include it here because, well, it's done, I might as well show it off, right? I started with a coat of Badger Modelflex Engine Black for the smoke box and smokestack, the firebox door, the locomotive deck, and the tender coal bunker. Once that all had a minute to dry, I added a coat of Citadel Color Iron Warriors to the main engine. I thought this would capture a nice sort of exposed steel color, as though the boiler was unpainted. And for what it's worth, while I have used this color multiple times in previous videos, I think this was the second time I had used it in general, and the first time was on an engine I still haven't bothered showing off. So yes, this was a bit of an experiment. With the tender, I wanted it to be bright and vibrant, so I used Citadel Color Mephiston Red for the sides. As for the frame, I instead went with Badger Modelflex Dark Tuscan Oxide Red, as it was tradition at the time to add this red to locomotive buffers, and I figured this is sort of the same region of the locomotive. Speaking of which, I also used this time to add some to the front buffer. Along the side of the locomotive and tender, I added a stripe of Citadel Color Catechin Flesh. I think the mindset behind this move was to make it look like the engine was framed with wood. It's not, so I'm not entirely sure why I would have thought this, but I do think the results turned out okay. Next, I added some Citadel Color Morghast Bone to a couple of spots as a sort of outline color for the locomotive. I started with the trim of the tender, then added a touch to some boards on the underside of the tender. On the locomotive, I added some to the various bands around the boiler and the firebox. For a finishing touch, I added some brass to the top of the smokestack and the little nub on the firebox, and with that, called it a day for this little critter. Honestly, I think this would have looked nicer with the red on the tender and the locomotive, and maybe I should repaint it at some point, but I'm still happy with the results on this little loco as it stands now. Now, after I finished the pioneering locomotive, I did start a few shortly afterwards, but I didn't really like how the paint was turning out on those engines. Plus, I needed to focus on the Annie County Railroad for the upcoming vacation. It also didn't help that I don't really have rolling stock. I do have a few passenger cars, some of which I have painted, but I don't have any freight, and I don't have couplers. I also don't really like how the coaches turned out, and I need to give them a new coat of paint. So, up until late July, I didn't really touch any of these locomotives. But, as I mentioned, I needed something to kickstart me. Something I didn't mention is that I wanted something exciting. And from the pile of engines I have, there was one that stood out among the rest. The one that Double M doesn't sell. A Garrett. The reason he doesn't sell it, it's not his design. It's a file you can buy off of Cults and print yourself. He just really wanted to give me a Garrett because he thought it would be funny. And you know what? He's kind of right. And I could not pass up on such a bulky locomotive. Since a lot of my locomotives seem to have different main colors, I decided to keep that theme going and went for a deep red locomotive using Citadel color Corn Red. This is a color that Double M actively suggested to me, as he likes using it a lot for his own engines. Once the red had a few days to dry, I recorded at 30 FPS. See, okay, I know this is a bit of a tangent, but on the vacation I had to get that new phone to replace my dying old ones, and for some reason, one of its quirks is that it just sometimes resets to 30 FPS by default, and I have to occasionally check just to make sure that it's actually on 60 FPS. I wasn't going to mention this, but good lord, watching the footage back, that paintbrush is choppy in this footage. Anyways, main boiler, black. I know most Garretts have their boilers as the same color as their water tank and coal bunker, but I thought the black would make for some interesting contrast on this engine. And while I was at it, I also took the opportunity to paint the skirting black. On the side of the running boards, I used some Iron Warriors for a little reflectivity and to bring some color consistency to the locomotive. I know chronologically this is the first use of the shiny silver on this locomotive, but I already planned to add some to the water tank cap and coal bunker sides, and thought this would be a nice way to somewhat link the two on both ends of the engine to the rest of the locomotive. On the boiler, I added some Citadel color Retributor armor as a nice brass color for the bands, pop valves, whistle, grab irons, etc. Once that dried, I spent some time touching up the black and adding some Iron Warriors to the pipe that arches over the boiler. Unfortunately, as I did this, I sometimes overpainted and touched up too much and botched the brass, so I had to touch up the brass on occasion, and I spilled some of the brass color. In fact, I spilled a lot. I was able to recover about half of what I spilled, but I swear if I had a nickel for every time that happened with this paint color in particular, I'd be 10 cents richer. Maybe that would cover the cost of my blood, sweat, and tears of trying to clean this up. Once that was cleaned up, though, I added some red to the running boards. Again, this was sort of trying to continue the use of colors throughout the whole engine, like with the silver on the sides of the running boards. Speaking of which, I finally got around to adding some Iron Warriors to the coal bunker and the water tank top. Told you I had that plan from the beginning. Admittedly, I can't prove that I had that plan, but shush, let me look smart. On the tram skirting, I added some more brass to help highlight the texture of the fake axles. To make this engine look more in-depth, the designer added some details to make it look like the engine was a 262 plus 262. The brass both helped to highlight these fake axles and make the area stand out, but also to continue the color across the whole engine. Again, color continuity. And with that, the engine was finished off camera. Everything past this point was pretty insignificant, most of it was touch-up jobs, so not really much to mention. That is, aside from how pretty this engine turned out, if you ask me. About halfway through, I got a little bit concerned that I had messed something up somewhere along the line, but I just committed to the idea and I think it worked out. Though, I must admit, it definitely turned me away from making the next one so complicated. So, who wants an all-black engine? I know I do. Weirdly enough, this is a model of an American engine. J&L is Steelworks and their many 040 Porter tank engines with their iconic boxy design. For this engine, it felt wrong to paint it in any color other than black. It's got a heavy industrial appearance of an American prototype, and I had a strong desire to do something simpler, all of which were perfect excuses to go for it. But I still wanted some color. So I painted a lot of random little details in Citadel color Iron Warriors. Most notably, the smokebox door. The hardest part of painting this engine was trying to replicate something from the prototype. Some white safety stripes on the pilot and the back of the cab. At first, I tried doing this with tape and a careful hand, but the white paint kept seeping under the tape because the tape couldn't quite stick that well to the curved surface. I very quickly gave up on the tape and resorted to painting everything by hand, and touching up things whenever I screwed up. And bam! Done. Easy. Simple. Well, okay, later on I added a spare HON30 whistle and painted it in brass, but I did that after painting the last engine I'd like to talk about today, and didn't bother with recording it. You'll see the whistle in the final product, though. The last engine that I got the motivation to paint today was this little freelanced saddle tank. This is one engine that I specifically asked for because I wanted to make a sister for the first OO9 engine I ever painted. So, I started with a coat of Citadel color Macrogy blue for the water tank and added a little bit on the lower part of the cab and underneath the coal bunker. For the top of the cab, to make this engine a bit more visually distinct from her sister to be, I decided to paint it black. I also hit the smokestack, smoke box, and running boards while I was at it. For the coal bunker walls, I thought it would be fun to highlight these in a bright color with strong contrast to the rest of the engine. So I used a little more Morghast bone. For the tram skirting, I had to search a bit since I hadn't touched this color in a hot minute, and I had to copy it from her sister. Eventually, though, I found and pulled out some Apple Barrel Military Blue. It's a nice desaturated blue that looks almost gray, and I rather like the moderate contrast that it has with the main blue of this locomotive. Next came some brass detailing. First was a stripe along the cab, then a bit around the windows, then the pop valves or whistle, whatever these two knobs are for, and lastly the steam dome. Now, at first, I was actually going to leave the brass at just these spots, and took a few photos of the two engines side by side to see if that really felt like it fit. And, well, it didn't. But before I could get to the water tank stripes, and before I made the full realization that I wanted them, I wanted to do some other details first. This included some Badger Model Flex Dark Tuscan Oxide Red on the pilot and the rear of the engine, some catechin flesh for the sandboxes, which I actually had to learn what those even were and had to paint catechin flesh on the old engine too, and some more Macagri blue on the faux pistons. Once the rest of these little details had some time to dry and the colors really felt final on the rest of the engine, I finally got around to adding the brass stripe to the water tank. And, well, if I'm being honest, it feels comically thick compared to her older sister. Yet, it feels kinda right. I don't know why, but on both of these engines, the gold stripe on the water tank feels appropriately scaled. And with that, there goes a few more engines for the collection. I still need a place to run them and some cars for them to pull, but hey, they make for great display pieces until then. No, seriously, my desk and shelves have been littered with these little locos for no other reason than for me to take pride in them and oogle for a little bit. And I gotta say, it feels good to be back in the swing of painting things. Now, I've still got a few of these engines left, probably 4, maybe 5 of them. And you bet that I'm going to have to complete painting them sometime soon. Heck, I might even need to order more from the guy who sells bean vouchers through a taxidermy shop. But for now, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching. Cheers, folks.